My name's Nicole Deary. Have been the executive director for Leadership Cumberland for the last 5 years. I have a board of 21 directors, full house. And I've been running this small nonprofit, this community leadership program for the last 5 years. So when Greg asked me to speak today from SEK, I knew I could not say no for a variety of reasons. Greg generously donates his time to SEK and talks about our 990. So when he said, "Can you speak about board engagement?" I said, "Sure." But I called no fair because I did not know one of my board members was going to be in attendance as I talk about board engagement. So, Barry Ann, feel free to add to anything I will be talking about today. But for those of you who don't know, Leadership Cumberland is a community leadership program. And we say that we develop effective leaders for the workplace and community. So employers will often send their staff through our program to learn leadership capacities that they take back to work, which makes them better leaders and managers. And in turn, we tap them on the shoulder and inform them of a community that also needs their leadership. So we were founded 32 years ago on the premise that nonprofits would not run out of leaders willing to serve. So our fellows learn nonprofit board governance while they're in our program. We pair them with local nonprofits of their choice, and they observe them for a year. So we're proud to say that about 70 to 80% of our fellows do go on to become voting board members of the boards they served. So I say all of that to say, I think this is why I'm here today to talk about board engagement. So there is no exact science around board engagement. There's a lot of information and articles and books. And so I'm simply going to be sharing from my experience as an executive director. Most recently, I decided to spice things up, and I'm also currently a board chair for a local food pantry in our community. So it's been great to see perspectives from both sides. And like I said, I'm just going to be sharing from my experience today, from those angles, as well as what we've seen working with nonprofits in our leadership program. So I'll be asking you to chime in too as we go along. One of the people I like to follow is Joan Gary. Is anybody familiar with Joan Gary? She's kind of a nonprofit guru. She's written a great book called A Guide to Nonprofit Leadership because Nonprofits Are Messy. But she's got a website, she does articles, she has a podcast. But there's a chapter in her book called Co-Pilots in a Twin Engine Plane. And I think that's just a really great analogy for the relationship you want between your executive director and your board chair, because you need to trust each other. One can't work well without the other. And so I think it's just a great analogy to keep in mind. Before we move forward, though, give me a feel for who's in the room. How many of you here are nonprofit leaders? Great. Any board members or board chairs in the room? Okay, fantastic. So we have an equal mix. So I'm going to go through some tips and best practices about board engagement, and hopefully you can look at them through both lenses. So again, no exact science. As I was putting this together, being an executive director and a board chair, there are things you just innately do. And so trying to organize this into a presentation, I thought, okay, remembering research-wise that we all absorb information better in chunks. And so we came up with the 3 C's: clear expectations, communication, and collaboration in terms of board engagement. So clear expectations. I loved this quote I found. I could not find an author to give credit, but you only get what you expect when you're clear about your expectations. And so I think that starts in a variety of ways, but it starts first with defined roles and responsibilities. So, in order to have good board engagement, you need to make sure you're attracting good board members. And you also need to make sure you have a great onboarding process when you do that. And so these are the documents I think every nonprofit needs in place. In order to do that, hopefully you all have a set of bylaws that govern your board and give them direction on how they can operate. Hopefully as a board, they're looking at that annually and making any adjustments as needed. And hopefully you do the same thing for your board officers. A lot of times when you need to recruit someone from the board to take an officer position, the first thing they're going to ask is, what do I need to do? What is the time commitment? And it looks really good if you're able to lay that out and have that available. Same with your board members. We're going to get into the commitment form in a second, in which we break down what the expectation is for each board member there. I think it's also great to be really clear with your board chair and your ED about what you expect from each other. So for some of you, that might be a 2-year commitment. A lot of the time it's annually and it can change. It's really, really important that you define how you're going to work together, what the expectation is from each other, when are you going to meet, that kind of thing. And then also, do you have an organizational chart for your organization? And again, this doesn't have to be rocket science or really elaborate, but who is doing what, who's reporting to whom, and are you listing your committees? How are you functioning? Where do your volunteers get involved? Where does the board play in that? And last and certainly not least is your strategic plan. It's one of the first things I show a prospective board member is just this is where the organization sees itself in the next 3 to 5 years. And this is kind of the map to get us there. So it needs to be clear, concise. It's a great guide for the ED and the staff to run the organization from the standpoint of the mission, but it needs to have accountability for the board in it as well. So again, if you don't have a strategic plan, highly recommend you do that. Some people will sometimes say, oh, we don't have the money to do that. You can't afford not to either. So a board matrix. Again, this is another great tool that not only helps you recruit for your board, but it helps you define the skill set you have around your table. So I'll just show you an example of one here shortly. Again, doesn't have to be rocket science. And as I'm walking through these examples, if you're thinking, oh, we don't have that or we need that, please don't feel like you have to recreate the wheel. The internet is wonderful. I'm going to give you some resources at the end. A lot of the things I have used, I have taken from other organizations and simply made them my own. So board matrix included. So on the board matrix, you're going to want your demographics. This is really helpful as we're talking about DEI initiatives as well. It's one of the things I hear from nonprofits the most is, hey, we're recruiting board members, but we need to be more diverse. How do we do that? Or do you have diverse board members? And so I would challenge you to think about how you think about diversity with your board. It's not just ethnicity. So are you looking at gender? How diverse are you? Are you looking at sexual orientation? Are you looking at age demographics? What generations do you have in your boardroom? And then also consider your mission. It's, you're all very unique in that regard. What demographics do you need to better serve your clients? And are those demographics represented in your board matrix? And then, of course, you want things like profession and education, skill set. So this can also be very different from what somebody does for their day to day. So you want to make sure you're capturing that as well. And then, of course, connections. Examples might be, are they connected to organizations that could give sponsorships? Are they connected to foundations that could give grants? Are they connected to, local chambers of commerce or other groups that you can get your organization in front of? And then also interests. Again, sometimes people come onto boards with the skill set that they do in their daily profession. And sometimes they come on a board because there's another set of skills that they want to use or can offer your organization. So you want to make sure you're not missing on those opportunities. Here's an example of one I found on the internet. I'd be happy to share mine with you, of course, as well, but you can see kind of just how you set it up. So diversity, fundraising, leadership, age, skills. This is an example of how one's put together. But as you let each board member, and again, I would emphasize, let your board members fill this out, not you filling it out on what you think your board member brings to the table. After they fill this out and complete it, you'll start to see patterns or holes or gaps. And it makes board recruitment a lot easier too, when you can look at something like this and then see where your holes are, especially in relation to, maybe if there's certain things in your strategic plan or skill sets you need to accomplish that, throw it on your matrix and see where it kind of all comes out. Fun fact is actually how I recruited Barry Ann, the board member in the room today, was when we did our board matrix, I realized we didn't have any other board member around the table that had any nonprofit fundraising kind of leadership skill set. And I'm a party of one leading a small nonprofit. So I knew that was the kind of skill set I needed to be able to tap into whenever I had questions or ideas. And she's been absolutely wonderful. She didn't pay me to say that, I promise. So board commitment form. This is where I think a lot of nonprofits can fall short sometimes. We hear from our fellows when they're doing their nonprofit board internships that I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm not sure what's expected of me. I'm not sure how much money they want me to give. So a board commitment form can be, and ours is just a one-pager. Again, does not have to be anything really complicated, but it's just outlining the expectations for your board members and make them sign it annually. So How often do you need them to attend board meetings? What is the acceptance rate? Ours is you can't miss more than 2 meetings a year. And then your board chair should be holding your board accountable to that, not you as the executive director. Committee involvement. We also mandate that our board members serve on committees. So each committee must be chaired by a board member because they need to report back to the board on what the committee is doing. And we allow the board members to then basically serve in the committee that interests them. Give, get, or donation. So a lot of people are familiar with give, get policy. I recommend that you highlight that on your commitment form. I'll just give Leadership Cumberland as an example. Our board splits a sponsorship at the beginning of the year, so everybody pays the same amount. That is mandatory. The board chair manages that. And then when we do our annual appeal, we call it a leadership impact campaign. The board must give at a personally significant level to them. So whether it's $1 or $1,000, whatever is, whatever they would like to give is acceptable. That's not mandated amount wise. But then sponsorships or grants. A lot of the times we have people around the boardroom table that are there because we know they're connected to organizations that can give larger sponsorships, or they're connected to grants or foundations that you might be able to get through those relationships. Make sure you outline that there too. And then event requirements. For us, we run a leadership program, so we have class sessions. So we require that board members must be at least one session a year. We do that for a few reasons. One, I need the help physically on event days. Two, you want to keep them close to your mission. And by making them attend events like that and be part of it, they're allowing to see that in action. So whether you have fundraisers, whether you have sessions, again, all nonprofits are unique. Make sure you're outlining exactly what you expect from them for the year and then have them sign it. But also offer what they can expect from you. So at the bottom of this form, I put, you can expect that I'm going to respect your time and have board materials to you in a timely manner. We're going to respect board meeting times. We try to stay around an hour unless there's an important issue, but we notify them ahead of time if it's going to be longer. Things like that. So the commitment form is for both of you to really just commit to the expectations are for the year, and then use that as a guide. Any questions on expectations, or is there anything any of you are doing with your boards that's not up here as far as roles and responsibilities, board matrix, commitment forms? So communication. So communication's a big word, right? Good communication is the bridge between confusion and clarity. So in regards to communication for this, what I'm really going to be talking about is the engagement between meetings. So we know that when you have your board at your monthly board meetings, you have their attention, hopefully you're going through your agenda, you're making decisions. But how do you keep your board engaged beyond just your monthly meetings? And so I'm going to go back to the topic of committees. Like I said, as an example, our board has to serve on a committee as well as the board. So our organizational and our chart and our bylaws dictate that the chair of our committees must be a board member. And we do that strategically so that the board member is reporting back to the board on what committee work is being done for the month. We also use the committees as a great way to glean future board members. So we have chairs and co-chairs, and it allows you to move people into leadership roles and then also eventually move them onto your board. But hopefully these committee chairs are not only bringing this information back to your board at your monthly board meetings, but they're also putting together reports about what's going on, in which hopefully your board is reading that before the board meeting so that you're not spending your board meeting time talking about everything that's been done the month prior. But this allows your committee chair to bring any issues that might need discussion at the board level that they can take back to the committee, and allows your board meetings to hopefully stay more futuristic as you talk about strategic items and governance and visioning for the organization. I also say too, we have to explain to the fellows because they will observe boards, and sometimes if they're not given the opportunity to serve on a committee, they can go, oh, this is kind of boring. I don't feel like I'm doing a lot at a board level. When you serve on a committee, it also, like I said, it allows them to stay close to the mission. I call it the warm fuzzies, right? So that's where you kind of get your hands and feet dirty. And I think that's a great way to keep your board engaged in between your board meetings with committee work. Storytelling and testimonials. We like to open up our board meetings with just a quick share, whether that's a success story, a testimonial, But you want to make sure you're keeping that again in front of your board. Remember, they're not staff. They're not getting to see that happen on the day to day. So you want to make sure if you can share some of those client stories with them, remind them that the work is meaningful and impactful. Testimonials, maybe you'll come across a client who shares a testimonial or a customer. Share those as well. They're also great to share on social media about your organization and the work you're doing. If you can, I understand some of you might have confidentiality issues. Or maybe you get a thank you that comes across your desk. Share that with your board, whether it's been a donation of service or time. Again, those are great ways to keep your board engaged, as well as board impact stories. So I'll actually share a story with you that is not my own, but it's a good one. One of our facilitators used to work for domestic violence services, and there was a gentleman that served on the board, couldn't give a lot of money, felt a little detached being a man on the board, being that a lot of the clients they were serving were women. And so there wasn't a lot he felt like he could do. But they asked him to deliver flyers about the shelter and its services and put them up at local like grocery stores and areas around town. Long story short, a woman takes a flyer at one of the grocery stores he delivers the flyer to, puts it on the back of her refrigerator, and it takes her 3 years to leave a domestic violence situation. But she knew that flyer was on the back of the refrigerator if she needed it. And the day came that she had had enough. She grabs the flyer off the refrigerator. She takes it into the domestic violence shelter and says, I need help. Well, what a wonderful story and way to share about the impact that you don't know that you're having sometimes as a board member, as an executive director, or at the staff level. So anytime you can tie any of that work back to your board, you want to make sure you're doing that. Again, it reminds them why they're there. It gives them purpose, and certainly inspires them to keep doing what they're doing. ED reports. This was one of the best things I did for my board and for myself. This is actually something I gleaned from Joan Gary, but I call it a 3x4 report. So when I would give my monthly board report, it was here's my page of who I had coffee with, who I'm prospecting, what got done this month, what's on the back burner. So I now use this 3x4 report, and this is all I give my board as far as what we've accomplished for the month. But it's a great way, as you can see, to celebrate recent organizational accomplishments. If you have more than three, fantastic, add another row. But for me, I highlight the three things I really want the board to know we need to celebrate. One, it reminds them of the work we're doing. Two, it's something for them to talk about as board members out in the community. What are the current organizational priorities? Again, short and sweet. What do we need to be focusing on? Where are we going? What's immediate and needs to be done now? And then what do I need directly from them? What are the current board needs? Is it that time of the year they need to be giving? Is it that time of the year we're recruiting? Is there sponsorship renewal that needs to happen? Again, it just allows me to outline exactly this is what I need from you. And then current prospects. So who are you thinking about as far as recruitment? As an organization, who do you need to get in front of? Who are the big players? I put them there and then let my board members say, hey, I know somebody there. I'll get you a meeting. Or, hey, let's have coffee with so-and-so. They're my neighbor. It's just a great way to, again, to kind of tap into the contacts that your board members might have and allow them to participate in that way. But short, sweet, I think my board loves it. They don't say anything. Very Ann shaking her head, yes. But it's just a great way to go over what's currently going on. So the last C I want to talk about is collaboration. And I love this quote by John Maxwell. It says, collaboration is multiplication. And when I'm talking about collaboration, what I'm really talking about is the relationships. And I'll speak from an executive director standpoint that this can feel like a lot of work. We're running an organization, sometimes we feel overworked and underpaid. Like I said, I'm a one-woman band, so I get to do all the things and wear all the hats. And so this board management piece can really feel like a lot to do sometimes, but I can't emphasize enough how important it is to invest in those relationships with your board members because they're going to pay back tenfold. So I try to do one-on-ones with each of my board members. And as I indicated, I have 21, so that is a high task. So I have not done it successfully all in 1 year, but my goal is to periodically have a one-on-one with each of my board members. And it's simply starting with the how and the why. So when I came to the organization, I don't know necessarily how that board member got there. How were they recruited? Why were they chosen? So it's a great way to kind of hear their story, what attracted them to the organization, why did they want to get involved, it's a great time to have a conversation about what are we doing well through their eyes? What can we do better? It just allows you to kind of pick their brain. And then where do they see themselves having the most impact? Maybe they're serving on a committee that doesn't feel very impactful to them. And I will say board members are usually wonderful and they'll say, put me where I'm needed most. And that's great, right? We love to hear that. But sometimes they're put in places where maybe their skill sets aren't being used or they're not able to use them to the full advantage of the mission in the organization. And so I'll give you an example. One of my board members, Taylor, he'd kill me if he knew I was telling you this, but when I came on, he served on the Organizational Development Committee, and we all know how fun that committee can be. So that committee is tasked with, reviewing the bylaws, electing board officers, board recruitment. And he was I think a fire chief at the time. He now works for FEMA, but he was on the committee. He would attend. You wouldn't hear much from him, but he was there. And as we started to have more conversation, I like to call him my party guy. He was always like, when's the alumni getting together for a beer? Or when, we should do some kind of event for the alumni. And it was a lot of fun, very extroverted. And I finally just said, Taylor, can I ask you to maybe move to another committee? Because I realized we weren't using him to his full potential on organizational development. And since then, Taylor went on to chair our alumni committee. He helped chair the 30th anniversary celebration a couple years ago and has helped to create our first alumni association. And he gave more personally with this move. He was engaged. He went above and beyond. He's just a really great example of he wasn't plugged into the right socket, if you will, that once I figured out what his skill set was and what he was passionate about and what he wanted to give back to the organization, he really blossomed. So again, it may not be realistic to do that with each one of your board members. Maybe you've dissected your board and you go, hey, here's my 20% that are, my A plus. And then, I have another 20% that are kind of between a B and a C. So maybe you focus on the ones that might be most impactful, but I promise you this will pay off if you take the time and intentionality to do it. Strength-based leadership. So this is something I actually gleaned from our leadership program. We do this with our fellows when they begin with us, and we do a couple personality assessments. So we do DISC, which is a communication assessment, as well as Strength Finders. And I decided that I was going to do this with my board. And again, it's been something that has really paid off in helping me to identify what strengths my board brings to the table. It also stops the crickets around the table at the board meeting when I ask for something and go, who wants to help me with this? Or we need to get this done. It allows me, once I know the strengths of my board members and what they're bringing, it allows me to have a more individualized ask. And the success rate is much higher when I go to somebody one-on-one and go, hey, I know you have a background in this, or I know you have a passion for this, or I know your skill set is around this. Would you help me with this? I haven't gotten a no yet. So it's also a great way to do some team building with the board. We did this kind of at a little reception we had with adult beverages. They always help. But we did strength finders and let the board kind of understand each other and what each other brings to the table. It helps also with that give or get, which can be intimidating for some people who think it's just financial or you just want me to fundraise. There's a lot of other ways your board can give time and talent. And that's a great way to discover it. And it also gives them more purpose too. So once they know why they're there and what you need to use them for, again, it increases engagement for them too. And then this board relationship piece, again, it's something we focus on in our leadership program, and we're trying to do a better job of doing it with our board as well. But these people need to trust each other. They're in a room together making really big decisions for organizations and missions that are important to our communities, and they need to be able to trust each other. We just came out of COVID. We're all feeling the separation that caused, I think, especially at a board level. I think we're all trying to manage the expectation coming out of it. Do we do in-person board meetings? Do we stay on Zoom? Do we try to do hybrid? But I'd encourage you to consider board retreats, opportunities for your board to get together and know each other. And then, with those retreats, you can usually pepper in things like strategic planning or assessments. I'd also encourage you to have times for your board to get together with no agenda, just to get together and strengthen those relationships. The same way you would go to a mixer and do that with other people in the community. I think it's important to be doing that at your board level. And then is your board assessing itself? Meaning, How engaged do they think they are? This is a great anonymous way to figure out where they'd like more training. Where do they think maybe they're not serving at the best way they can be? But I would try to have you do that annually, and you can do that through, SurveyMonkey. Again, that doesn't have to be really hard or complicated. And then back to the new board member onboarding process. Allow your board to be part of that. I think this is another area where boards can fall short, is really having training in place for new board members when they come on. I mean, certainly your executive director and board chair should be there for that. But if you have committee chairs, invite them to attend and talk about the committee work that's being done, or invite them to serve on committees as they're choosing. And then something that's worked well for us too is board mentors. So we have a funnel that comes from our leadership class of alumni that serve on our board. And so for some of our board members, this could be their first board experience. So we want to try to pair them with a board mentor to help integrate them, make them feel welcome, somebody they feel they can go to and ask a question. Because let's face it, that can be intimidating in a board meeting to go, I don't understand the financials, which who does understand the financials? I know I'm in an accounting conference, but it can be somebody for them to bounce those intimidating questions off of that they may not do in a full boardroom. And that's engaging for both of them. Another way to build relationships and really plug people in. And so I'm going to end with this thought again. This is Joan Gary, but it says nonprofits are messy. Not enough money, too many cooks, and an abundance of passion. Truer words have never been spoken, but your board members are there because they want to help. So I encourage you to find ways to harness that passion, get them engaged, and help you continue the great work that you're doing. Okay, I'm just going to leave you then with some resources. Again, these are on your slides. I mentioned Joan Gary, but also PANO is a great resource. I'm sure most of you are familiar with PANO, the Pennsylvania Association of Nonprofit Organizations. They have a lot of great articles and templates that you can glean from. Locally, Chad Barger, Productive Fundraising, he's been a local guru that has helped train, our board on some issues, as well as he's been a great facilitator for class. And then Board Source and Blue Avocado are also two websites I go to a lot in regards to nonprofit governance and leadership articles. So just leave you with a few of those. And then if you have any questions or if there's any templates I can assist you with or anything I talked about today, please let me know. I'd be happy to help.